Hey, we might get going. Sorry about the technology hiccups. They put another little screen on the bottom which you had to have turned on to be able to log in. I want to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on Aboriginal land that was never ceded, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognising that any conversation about housing is really important for the local Aboriginal community. Large number of people who have lived in this place over many years have been pushed out through gentrification over the last 15, 20 years. And there is a call from the Aboriginal community for Aboriginal affordable housing on all government controlled land within the Redfern-Waterloo area. And we acknowledge the importance of that call to have a viable, ongoing Aboriginal community continuing in this space up until into the future. Pay respects. Thank you for coming along tonight. We wanted to start, Michael Wheatley is the head of Homes Portfolio from Housing New South Wales. So Housing New South Wales brings together the old LAC, which is now Housing Portfolio, as well as the Housing Services part, which used to be the DCJ housing part, as well as Aboriginal housing and some responsibilities for worker housing and some other responsibilities around affordable housing. So Michael heads up the portfolio bit. We have an apology from Rebecca Pinkston, who is the CEO, who is Michael's boss, that she had a family emergency and at the last minute let me know that she couldn't make it. So Michael is well placed to be able to talk about this, and in particular in terms of the site for the clothing store. Before Michael came into the role that he's playing in Homes New South Wales, he was with Transport for New South Wales, and had some responsibility for stuff on that site. So he does know some of the history. But before we get into looking specifically at that site, I've asked Michael to start off with any update, or just tell us where things are up to as far as Waterloo, and maybe just a little bit about what sort of changes are happening within Homes at the present moment.
Thanks, Jeff. And I too want to just acknowledge the Aboriginal owners of this land, the traditional custodians. And yes, you're absolutely right that the housing for Aboriginal people in this area is a really critical area, really critical thing for us. And I'd have to say, in terms of Waterloo and our recent selection of our preferred proponent, we felt that their bid was very strong in the outcomes for Aboriginal housing, and that is one of the reasons why we did select that preferred candidate. So, and Stockland was chosen and they are working in partnership with Link Wentworth Birribee Housing and also City West Housing. They're the community housing providers. They are the preferred candidate at the moment, as you would have heard, and we are still working now with them to finalise the agreements and finalise the planning of the project. We decided to announce, even though the details are not finalised, we decided to announce it so that we collectively, the team, along with Link Wentworth, Birribee, City West and Stockland, can start openly engaging with the community alongside Homes New South Wales. So we've got a lot of work to do to still finalise those agreements, and we're hoping to do that by Christmas. It might take 1 or 2 extra months, but the good news is that they're out there, and we want to collectively start talking more with the community rather than it being hidden. So there's not much of an update since the last 3 weeks. Other than that, I do want to reiterate that It doesn't mean just because we've announced that, doesn't mean that we're going to be saying move out now. We have been out there and our team's been out there engaging with the tenants, and we've had a lot of sessions and barbecues and pop-ups to keep the community informed. And we won't really start coming to talk to anything about relocations into well into next year. So that's the current situation. Is that how's that?
So you've said well into next year. I think the
Early quarter sort of next year. Yeah. Well, it's not going to be January. I can assure you of that.
I think, doing things at the end of December and January is not the best way. Michael, maybe you could just tell us how things tracking as far as the new housing that's being built above the metro site.
Yep. So that is going well. You can see the cranes and cranes happening, and that will be on track, and that will be an important part of helping us, obviously in this area and with the delivery of the first stages of the new social housing. So I should have checked the completion date, but I've
May next year.
May next year. Yeah, that's right. It is. Yes. So I think they're still on track for that. Yeah.
Are there any quick questions just on Waterloo before we move on to the main focus for the night?
What are the numbers of Waterloo, please?
So the total development will be about 3,000 dwellings, and about just over or around half of them will be social and affordable. So 1,500 will be social.
What's the split between social and affordable?
It is 35% social, 15% affordable. I think. Let me just I think it's 30% social and about 20% affordable. So that number's out there. I'll check and I'll confirm with Jeff. Sorry.
Is there not some dedicated Aboriginal housing?
Yes, there is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, about 15.
So Birrabee is an Aboriginal
housing provider. Yep.
Any chance Scotland has given an indication about where they're going to start, which end?
No, that's some of the details we're resolving over the next 3 to 4 months. Yep.
And they're the questions people want answers to.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's then move on to the North Eveleigh Precinct, which was the focus for tonight's meeting. There was an announcement at the beginning of July that Homes were going to take responsibility for that site. It was taken out by Transport through Tahi out to the market a bit before that. And then in the audit that was undertaken of government-owned land, it was identified and being transferred to Homes. So I'll pass over to Michael and he can tell us where it's up to and what your thinking is around that site.
So, I mean, that's some important background. Transport and Tahi were looking at that site to redevelop that site. And if you're familiar, the clothing store is on the western side of Carriage Works, and there was a rezoning approved for the eastern side of Carriage Works closer to Redfern Station. That's called the Paint Shop Precinct. So Homes New South Wales, as part of the land audit, has decided we could use that clothing store site, and it's just the clothing store at this stage. We are not talking about the paint shop. It is important that when you look back at what Tahi were doing 2 years, and it was before the election under the previous government, that they were initiating a market process for that clothing store site for build to rent. And that was about 500 apartments. And that build to rent scheme and the build to rent proposal that they were looking at was full market housing. And that was obviously put on hold with the change in election and a pause on all land transactions across all of New South Wales was was put in place. And the government then, the new government, Labor government, this government has initiated the land audit process, looking at all surplus land. And for government, looking at sites that were suitable for housing. And obviously the clothing store came up in that land audit as being suitable for housing. In that process of that land audit, Homes New South Wales has the first right to look at any of those sites and say that site is ideal for what we do, for the delivery of social and affordable housing. And that site was on the list, and it is a great site for social and affordable housing. And so we did actually put our hands up and say we would like that site, and that as part of that land audit process, and then government confirmed that through ERC and the budget. The really important part of this process is that the government is also funding us to actually deliver housing on that site. So at the moment, we have just started the process of working with Tahi and Transport on the transfer of the land. We know that that site has potentially about 500 dwellings on that site as market dwellings. There is already a City West housing building there. That building was built under a certain planning arrangement, the state government SEP planning framework. We are looking to continue with that planning framework. We are not at the moment considering altering anything. We're not considering taking it to rezoning and trying to get a whole lot more on it. We are will be planning on using the existing planning controls that are in place. We are quite familiar, obviously through my previous experience of Transport, with the sort of planning in the site, and we're looking to just build on that. And I know that there was some community engagement and workshops about that site, and we are intending to continue to run with all of that feedback. We are not starting with throwing it all out and starting again. We're looking to actually continue to build on the work and the community input that's already been put on the site. So we've only had the site for about 2 or 3 months, and so we are looking to ramp it up. We will be delivering a bit of mixed tenure out of it, so it will be at least 50% social and affordable. There will be some market housing on it to help build the community, and we absolutely want to respect all the work that's been done so far in terms of planning and the local context.
So I guess my first question, I mean, clearly there's remediation that needs to happen on the site. Is that Transport doing that, or is Homes doing that, or where does that part of it landed?
Well, Transport done a hell of a lot of work on the contamination and the remediation. We are looking to use Transport team that's already done all the work on it, and to continue to them to get to do it. It is still at the moment, until the land is actually physically transferred, legally transferred. They are the owners, but they've already got a team working on it.
Yep.
And we are using that team and continue to work to accelerate any remediation that's done on it.
I guess the other question that comes just from the history of it, when Tahi was taking it to market, they went, as you said, to a build to rent model, which meant that the land was going to stay in the hands of Tahi and the hands of the government. Is a build to rent for the private part of the site an option as far as Homes New South Wales are concerned, or does that 50% need to be sold off?
We'll be looking at it all. The nuance of the Tahi proposal was that they were looking for a private partner, and it would have been about 50-50. They were looking for private investment in that. So it wasn't going to be fully owned. It was going to be on a lease. but we will retain at least the 50% ownership of our land, or of the dwellings. We are open to all options around what the housing will be. We haven't determined. Suffice to say, it is mixed tenure, so there will be market housing, and it is important to create that diversity.
I mean, market housing can be built to rent.
It can be. That's right. That's right.
So,
Like, and that's the point. It will be full paying. 50% of it will be full market rent.
Yeah. So then I guess I'm asking a couple of questions before I open that out. So I guess one of the questions is, well, how is this different from what you're doing in Waterloo, where you're basically looking at a 50-50 arrangement with 30% social, 20% affordable. There is government funding available out of the budget. So how does that change? What gets delivered on this from the self-funded model that LAC has used historically?
Yeah. So we do use market housing to subsidise social and affordable housing on these mixed tenure sites. That is important because it does deliver more housing and more outcomes. This site's really important because it does help us. It is vacant. That's fundamentally different. It is a vacant site, and that's a great opportunity to bring on social and affordable to help increase in the area. We're not taking social and affordable stock away. Again, we are looking at as many options as we can of how to use our funding to deliver the mixed tenure. We haven't finalised it. We may even commence, we may stage it. We may focus on working with a CHP to deliver the social and affordable whilst we sort out other things. It's not one thing, it's not as if we're going to be just handing something over to someone else. We may stage it as Homes New South Wales. So these are all the options we are looking at, and that will be different, slightly different to how we're doing Waterloo.
So the social housing could be run by Homes, or it could be run by a CHP, or
it could be both. It could be both. Still. It is important. It is likely, equally likely that we could be getting a CHP involved, and how we do that, we're working on those sorts of models. So we do things like half bids with CHPs, but it could be a mix of things.
So one of the questions as far as Waterloo was concerned was that to get the extra 20% affordable housing, that was left up to the consortiums to bid for how they might be able to achieve that. If there's government funding going into this, presumably we're talking about perpetuity on the.
Yes.
We are.
Okay? Yes.
So that will be at least one.
Yes.
One change.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, so that gives you a little bit of a picture of some of it, and we'll open it up to people's questions for the either for questions that you have or things that, if you know the site, you have concerns about that you want to put on the agenda early to be able to do that. Yep.
So you mentioned there's the 15% split between the market rate, and then out of the other 50%, 80% of it is social, 20% of it is affordable. And out of that 80%, 15% is Aboriginal. Is that correct?
Sorry, do you mean for Waterloo or for the clothing store?
For this clothing store.
That clothing store will be taking it on. We've set 50% social and affordable and 50% market. We're still working on the exact split between the two, social and affordable. If it ends up being 55 and 45, if it ends up being, that's our intention.
Okay.
And we haven't.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the Like, is that a process that's backed by evidence or some kind of trial? Like, is this based on experience? Is this based on what contractors are going to do? How do you make this decision?
So we have, we make it based on benchmarks, on what we know works from a community point of view, from other examples around the world, that is an ideal mix to create diversity in the community. Now, we may end up doing 35% or 35% social, 15% affordable. We may do 30 to 20. We're so early in our thinking on it that we haven't locked in what the details of the proportions, but we do know that on larger sites in these inner city areas, that to get the right balance in the community, it will be about 50% social affordable, 50% market.
Okay.
And it may go up and down a little bit as we refine planning and those things.
So, can I just say one other thing? So you mentioned that the market rate houses are also used to subsidize the social houses in this project. That's right. So how much, like what % would you be looking at for the subsidy?
It varies, and it's not so much. It is a way of delivering more housing, and it's about getting the right community. So it is not a driver. We are going to go for the right amount of social and affordable housing. We have funding to do that, but we know we can deliver more in other areas as well.
Can I just, one question that sort of flows a little bit from this, there was another part of the announcement which was a little bit different. It specified that there would be a certain proportion of the housing made for people fleeing domestic violence.
Yeah.
What's the sort of clarification there? Because that's different from what's happening in the normal allocations into places like Waterloo.
Yeah. So that is a holistic policy and decision for homes across all of its new supply. So it's not specific to any particular project, but we are delivering 8,400 homes out of the budget, and that's looking at how we deliver that across the whole of all the new supply. And it may even involve things like when we build new homes and we're building 1 or 2 bedders, we might be moving single people out of 3-bedroom homes, which then frees up family homes for families and for people who are fleeing domestic violence. And so it is a whole of approach for us to look at not only the new houses that we supply, but also we will be freeing up other houses which help to provide that accommodation.
And the second thing out of that, I'm not sure we got any clarification about how much Aboriginal affordable housing might be in that site.
We haven't worked that out.
There's a question online, and then I've got one over here. Julie.
Sorry.
You're on mute, Julie.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Michael. It's Julie here. I'm on the Counterpoint Community Centre Management Committee, and it's good to hear that you're going to be taking on board some of the consultation processes that have already occurred with the site. And I was just wondering if you can share with us some of the, what you feel you have heard from some of those consultation processes, or what you're aware of, or what those consultation processes have covered.
Yeah, so we do know there was a lot of discussion around the open space provision on that site. I am reflecting back a bit on the detail, but yeah, we know that's important, and what happens in and around the actual heritage building of the clothing store. We do know that the characteristics, especially Wilson Street, is a concern. So there's some of the things. I can't remember the rest, apologies, but there's some of the main areas, and we're looking to definitely retain and create that, or have that open space and community facilities that came out of that consultation.
Thank you. Thank you.
One was just talking about the social and affordable housing. Is it basically all the same stock that's built and then it's just split up into?
It is very similar. It is essentially, we use the term tenure blind, so you can't tell whether it's social or affordable. But yes, the intention is that it's not essentially the same.
The other question was, I was a little confused when that release came out recently, what was actually happening with the physical clothing store?
The heritage, that will be retained. That will be retained and be reused. We'll look at, I think, the planning around it won't be converted into residential.
Right.
I know there was discussion about retail amenity we wanted in there, but also the question is, how can it be used for community space? That's right. Yeah.
It was one of the conversations that happened probably 2 years ago about what could happen with that site.
Yeah.
The initial planning thought that it might have been able to be used for apartments, but then when people looked at it, it's not viable given its construction. So that's an ongoing conversation. I think if you've got suggestions for what can happen there, then that's
we'll continue to engage with the community there on the use of that. It is a great facility, and it is a great facility to be accessible to the public. And obviously, its relationship with the open space will be also quite important.
I think Howard has a question.
We'll take one of Bruce's.
How did you establish the 500 dwelling target?
It is based on the current planning controls and the previous work that Tahi has.
Well, I'm very familiar with those and they're rubbish. I'm sorry. You can't get 500 dwellings on that site without high-rise.
The current planning controls do allow that, bearing in mind that in social and affordable, we have a lot higher proportion of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, which obviously means you get.
You're assuming that will be high-rise, right?
No, it's medium density. It's within the current set planning controls.
What height? How many stories?
We're just reviewing the planning controls.
Sorry?
We are reviewing the planning controls at the moment to ascertain what the height will be. So we are getting that information and working through that.
So I think that the 2008 controls were for the stuff against the railway line were 12 stories. Then it came down to, I think, 4 fronting on to
Wilson Street.
Yeah, Wilson Street.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the 2008 controls, not the stuff that was done by urban growth when they tried to push them up sort of about halfway through 2015, 16.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Very sceptical. I'm sorry, Michael. You talk about a consultation. We live opposite the site. They haven't had any consultation with residents of Wilson Street. So
we ran, Transport and Tahi ran some community engagement sessions around that site about 2 years ago.
Well, 2 years ago was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Are you going to do it again?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, a lot of those conversations a couple of years ago were sort of selecting groups out of rather than the public sort of sessions that urban growth had sort of 7 or 8 years ago. So there wasn't a large sort of public thing in the way in which it was when they were doing it. Did you say there was another one online there?
Howard is in the message. If you can.
No, someone online?
Howard.
No, all right, I'll go to Norrie while we're. Norrie.
couple of questions. I'm guessing, just checking, it's theoretically possible for Home New South Wales to be the landlord of people paying full market rent, because we get letters saying what our properties are valued at. And if someone in your household start working, maybe you have to pay full rent, so there's no reason theoretically why homes couldn't be the builder and the landlord making, no money on 50% of people of the places at market rent. And the second question is, housing shortage across all of Australia. What the places that we've got at the moment in Waterloo were built by public works departments back in the 50s and 60s. Is it the Labor government, state or federal level intention to build up public works departments so that places like this or public housing can be built by the government so that it's investing its money in houses? Stock market and future funds.
It's probably beyond my remit, what the government is tending to do with the Public Works Department. Public Works Department.
Not enough people qualified at the moment. But
Yeah,
like a 10-year plan, you can have apprenticeships, blah, blah, and 10 years, you can have a fully skilled workforce.
Yeah, that's right. And I can't comment on whether there are any of those plans. It's not that it's just beyond my remit, and I don't know what the plans are for anything around that. I can, one thing that the government is doing, the government architect is, and we are working with the government architect at looking at what's called pattern book design. And because everyone is needing to deliver more housing, the government architect is running a process to relook at our design competitions to bring in what's called pattern housing, and that's standardized, or not standardized, but common building or housing layouts that will be accepted and anyone can use, and it is aimed to have housing that is more efficient to build, but also because it can be used anywhere, builders can all have their prices on it. And it's something that can be rolled out, and it will make it easier for planning approvals as well. And that's similar to what used to happen with the Housing Commission all those years ago and Public Works all those years ago. So that idea of pattern book design is being relooked at by the government architect.
Yeah, just on that, Norrie, also, the government did give Landcom a role, in particular in sort of Western Sydney for housing delivery. But again, Landcom tended to sort of go into arrangements with developers rather than actually have the workforce to be able to deliver stuff themselves.
Sorry to interrupt. A question from Amy. Will the zone be residential?
Sorry, what's that?
Will the zone be residential?
The clothing store site will be residential with that small community retail in the actual heritage building. So that'd just be a very small part of it.
The clothing store will be partly residential?
No, the actual clothing store building, the heritage building, will be retained with a non-residential use.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a nice idea, but it's hugely constrained developing that site if you're trying to get that density. I'm an architect, right? Jeff knows my opinion about this. I think that it's a nice building, but I think the argument for keeping it, if you're trying to get a reasonable yield without high rise, is just crazy.
It's a pretty significant building. It is heritage listed.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So is everything in the area.
Yeah.
The area is an aggregation heritage.
Yes, it is.
And you have to evaluate what its values are, what you do about that.
That's right. Yeah.
My question was whether these pattern houses that you're talking about are being specifically designed for areas that are close to transport.
They're being designed for all houses. It's a general thing. I was talking about it in relation to, you know, our need to deliver, or all governments need to deliver housing across all spectrum, from market housing and social and affordable. Obviously, the priorities are to deliver housing close to transport nodes. That's where the planning is focusing, and where the government's priorities are focusing. That is why we've selected, we are an example of selecting the clothing store, because it is close to transport and amenities. So that is developing houses, whether it's patent book, whatever, close to transport is a focus.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Are you still planning on building 500 apartments?
That's what we currently understand that the site will support, and we are working through that. That is the initial work, but as I said, we've only just taken it over, and the advice and information we've had from previous planning that's done on it. So yes, we are looking at around 500.
Do you
But
have any
that will-
idea?
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, and so that will obviously be worked through over the upcoming months, and until we start discussing and start looking at the planning application.
How many actual buildings do you expect to build, and what's your plan towards the height of those buildings?
Again, the actual number of buildings will be worked out over the next year. The heights will remain consistent with the 2008 set or concept plan.
What was that?
I think that, as Jeff said, that is about near the railway, about 12 stories, and getting down to about 4 stories on Wilson Street.
Understood.
Yeah.
So if you have a look at the REDWatch Facebook page, we did actually post the 2008 controls that actually have the heights. When you talk about number of buildings, it's a bit tricky, because you've got along the railway line, you've got sort of U-shaped buildings, which you could cast as, depending on how you put them together, could be 3 buildings or 1 building. So it depends on how you count them a little bit. But if you have a look at that, you'll get an idea of what the existing planning controls are. They were put together in 2008 when the Redfern-Waterloo Authority did a concept plan for the entirety of the site. And so they go back to that time.
Are you familiar with how many levels the existing City West building is?
City West up to 12 was the City West, I think, is about
That's maybe 6 stories.
6 stories.
That actually go from the ground level of the site or from Wilson Street.
Sorry, to the ground level of the site.
Right.
So the
Wilson Street at street level you're talking about?
I would have to come back to you. We will clarify that, because we need to go and actually look at the planning controls. So to be clear, we are talking about existing planning controls. We're not talking about the design that we may actually adopt. So because we have we know some work has been done on it, but we're just getting access to the site and the information. And so we will have a process to go through to work out exactly what we build. So all this discussion is around what the planning regulations currently say.
That 12 stories high, that would be the highest buildings in that area. That'd be higher than platform and higher than Channel 7 on the other side of the railway line, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we will have a look at what those controls actually are. So I just want to reiterate that is the current planning regulations or guidelines for the site. Yeah.
Stories max.
Yeah.
So those planning controls, basically the concept plan sets. So if that was a private site, any developer could come in and build within those planning controls, and basically that's what they would expect. So That's not to say, being a government site, that there might not be room for community pressure or whatever to change some of that, but that's basically what a developer would look at that site and say, that's what the controls are that I'm allowed to build.
So I just want to go back to the funding you were talking about. So you said we would get at least 50%. Now, does that mean that you've been funded for more or less 50% of that 500 dwellings? Or do you know what the funding looks like yet?
We have been given a broad range of funding to deliver on the 8,400 homes. So, and we, with each project we look at each and make sure that the project that we do actually fits within that overall budget. So the details of that and how much gets allocated that we had to work through. But the key thing is that we do have funding to deliver mixed tenure projects. So we don't, yes.
And just a comment, we talked about how, sort of target for Aboriginal housing.
Yeah.
I just think it's very important to work that out now before you go out to
Yes.
developers.
We agree, and we ourselves have a lot of homes in that area. We do house Aboriginal families in that area. We're very aware of that need, and we have other communities in and around there that do have that need. So that and that site is a really, really important site for Aboriginal peoples. So many of it was actually the first source of employment in New South Wales for Aboriginal people, and when they came into the city, that is where they got their first jobs, and that is one of the founding elements of Redfern and the Aboriginal community in Redfern. And so we're very aware of the significance of that. That is one of the places where the Aboriginal culture and the European culture at the time really did start to integrate. One of the points of coming together. So we are quite aware of the significance of that. So,
but I guess just on that, we have a large proportion of a significant proportion of Aboriginal people in social housing.
Yeah.
The big need in the area is for Aboriginal affordable housing for people that grow up in the area, associated with the area, but as they're starting out, couldn't afford to live in the area. And so that's one of the big missing pieces at the present moment in terms of Aboriginal housing. Yeah. Julie, I think you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but someone else has posted a question several times in the chat. So I'm not quite sure the protocol for that getting answered.
Can you read me the question and we'll get an answer for you?
It isn't my question, so I may not do it justice, but it says, will the zone be residential? No platform, and the new apartments, why not residential?
Will be residential.
Yes. So I think the question is the whole lot get zoned as mixed use, or does it just, is we going to have residential with a block in the middle of that'll be mixed? And
we'll work through that. That's a combination of consultation, understanding what the needs are in the area, the planning controls, what is allowed under that 2008, and you do need to build amenities into these areas as well.
Did that cover the question? Whoever wrote that? Amy?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. It's just that I do live in platform apartments and I live right next to Carriage Works, and I understand, and it's a great look, I love Carriage Works. But I can remember when I moved in there about 9 years ago, And I live right on the corner, and there's bump in and bump out when they have the events till 3, 4 in the morning. And they've had concerts and live music, and our windows shake, and we don't have double glazing. And I was told it's not residential and they can basically do what they like. So my concern is there seems to be sort of no respect for the people that actually live there, and sometimes we're too scared to say anything. And I just wonder whether there's, and I didn't know at the time, because I've always used to rent privately, that there was a difference. So my concern is with, it's great that these other apartments are going to be built, but I don't understand, why isn't it residential like everywhere else? And why don't we have the same rights as, you know, sleep quality? Because when the bump ins and the bump outs go all night with big semi-trailers with a huge event, it's a big concern for your mental health and your state. I mean, I work, always have work, and I get up at 5 in the morning to work at 7. So that's my biggest concern.
That's good feedback. And that's something we can need to sort of plan in to the project.
Thank you.
So I know one of the issues that has been raised is about the entry to the site. So one of the things that's different from what happened in the 2008 plan was that the RWA, Sydney Metropolitan Development Authority, changed the way in which the road came in. So basically now when people do bump out, they go sort of right down that main thing rather than along the railway line, which was one of the bits that were there in the original plan. And I know Bruce has always been an advocate that in the same way as on the paint shop precinct, they're talking about putting a road directly in and down the incline, that continuing Golden Grove it would be a better solution to that. So that's been an ongoing conversation, which I think the opportunity is there to look at, because one of the issues, I've just been doing some work with some Sydney University architect students who are actually looking at the site. And one of the problems is the split levels that entrance actually creates. So so people that live on this site, their closest railway station is going to be McDonaldtown. So they've basically got to sort of go up an incline, down some steps, and then down through the back of the Pines estate. So there's a question about how you link this site better to McDonaldtown.
The site planning is crap.
Yep. And so and even the park is sort of at a lower level, but then you've got another part of that issue, which is that when it became an industrial site, not only did you get the sort of almost 2-story drop off Wilson Street, but you also had the site levelled out to the railway line. So when you actually look at that up against Pines Estate, you've got sort of a mound of earth, which is sort of 1.5 stories high at the end of it, because it's all been flattened out away from the natural sort of thing. So you've got these very mixed levels that gets very difficult to then work out how do you actually integrate this.
The site. It's very inefficient utilisation of the site. If you're trying to get 500 dwellings on it, you've got to deal with those issues. And the other issue is, of course, how much open space and where it is. Of course, the community will want to link to Wilson Street, but the issue locally, because we live there, is that Hollis Park is incredibly intensely used because it's the only park in that area. And so they have to replace the grass annually because of all of that. So everybody is hoping that the park here will complement Hollis Park, serve a similar population. And so that the current bits of open space that have been provided are cosmetic. They're a joke.
Well, certainly the ones onto Wilson Street.
They're useless. So it needs an aggregate park that can serve a whole range of different uses.
So certainly some areas there to to look at. I know a couple of the developers that were having a look at the site when it was out to Tahi were also scratching their heads about how they actually dealt with some of those issues. Another question?
Yeah, I was going to ask what sort of time frame we looking at? Sounds very early.
Yes, we are working through that program at the moment to understand the timeframe.
Is it, you say at least a year away from tools?
Is that when Tahi transfers the land? Or is that, or they answer the phone?
We obviously, want to get on and get into bringing on the social and affordable housing. There is remediation to happen on the area. There are planning approvals and the transfer site. We actually still have to resolve some of the land transfer issues with transport and the sort of details around that. So that all of that is going to take a while. So we do have a good year of work, both planning and things like remediation, and that could actually the remediation could go a bit longer. So there is a lot to do before we even start to pour concrete for the new buildings.
I think the 2 years that might have been mentioned at the media conference, I think was pretty optimistic. Karen.
Can you, sorry, carry on.
The government being the builder and the landlord, the market section as well as the rest of the housing there, and that way be investing all those billions of dollars into housing instead of on the stock market as a sustainable.
Yeah, and part of that, as Jeff has touched on, is the government is supporting Landcom as well, because Landcom do a lot of market housing, and they are the government's developer of market housing. And so not only are they funding Homes New South Wales, where our focus is social and affordable, the landlord is also Landcom, a part of that to develop market housing.
So the actual rent paid for that market section of the housing will be going back into government funds? Or
no, these Jeff we haven't made any decisions on that, but yes, Jeff just pointed out that market housing could be built to rent owned by government, and government is with Landcom are looking at some of those options.
So there, just as a background on that, there was some work that was done a couple of years, well, probably 4 years ago now, by Cameron Murray and Peter Phibbs, which actually looked at how you might change the dynamics of what the government could actually own and build if the government allowed LAC at that point to borrow against its assets and to be able to run market housing that was cross-subsidising its other housing. So there's work that's been done on that, but there's a fair way to go from where LAC have been to wherever they might end up in the future, would be the way I'd put it.
And if Minister Jackson was here, she would be clearly looking at me and say, Michael, just focus on delivering social and affordable housing. So that's the priority at the moment.
Owen, online.
Hi, thanks. I'm a Darlington resident. I just have a question on the remediation work that you say that needs to be done, which is, I guess, a roadblock to progress into actually getting some housing delivered. What is that remediation work? Can you explain any more about that?
I haven't been briefed on the details of the work that Transport's done for the last years. We've got a session coming up to get full visibility of that remediation. All I know is that it is typical of a formal industrial site rather than a heavy industrial use. So it's not a gasworks, but that's one thing I can say, it's not a gasworks like the other places.
But it was an industrial site. This is
Yeah.
where the timber
Yeah.
yards and everything
Yeah.
were, so who knows?
I've had no indications that it's anything different to other sort of general industrial sites that are around the city. They're not petrochemicals, or anything like that.
I've got a question when you're ready.
Yep, okay. Got one here on the floor.
So to correct me if I'm wrong, the way that this talk has gone so far, as you've said, there's a lot of decisions that haven't been made. There are a lot of unknowns. One unknown is the funding, one unknown is the housing split. There are a lot of things you can't tell us. And there are a lot of ways we can't get involved in deciding those things. So I have a very simple proposal. There's a lot of stake here. If this housing is built and the planning is poor, then we could end up with the same underutilized parks. And I mean, I don't have as much experience as the other people here to speak for the mistakes that poor planning can cause. But I think that is exactly the point. The residents in this room are perhaps the most informed people in this suburb to design this planning. So I have a very simple question for you. Why don't you involve joint planning by residents and Homes New South Wales in deciding these proposals to make sure that you'll get the best outcome for everyone?
We will be engaging with the.
No, I don't mean engage, I mean joint design. I mean joint participation at every level, not just at a consultation level, at designing policies. Why don't we do that instead of having just these consultations?
We will get out, and it is not just about the planning process, but we will be getting out, and we are learning from other examples of having actual working sessions with residents to actually inform the design. And we're doing that in other estates and other areas around in New South Wales, and we're learning from that, and we will be getting out there and then a similar approach that actually involves and gets the input from.
So right now, these decisions that you need to make that will be made perhaps by May next year, when development will start. None of those.
There's a big planning approval to occur. So the next year is about starting to understand and define what it might be. So
okay, but I mean, all that's fine. It's a very long-term process. What I want to emphasize is currently how many of the residents in this room are involved in drafting the policies and proposals that you are making?
No, because we haven't started. Because we haven't started. Yeah, and it's a good point. Yeah.
So I guess one of the challenges for them is to say, at what point do you want Michael to come back and have a meeting around the site, and to be able to get an update of what's happening and to throw up and discuss some of these challenges around the site. I mean, just give you an example. The site butts on to Ivory's Lane, right? People in Ivory's Lane don't want to see the trees that are along that and the wildlife that's in there disappear. But that is going to be probably one of the thoroughfares that people are going to walk down to be able to get to the station. Probably not the best sort of long-term solution for how that bit of the site butts up against a new part of the site. But the only way you'll change some of the people's thinking about that is actually to be able to have that conversation with the community and between them and housing to be able to work out what solutions there might be to that site. So that's the sort of thing that I think comes from the sort of things you're talking about in terms of community being much more involved in the planning side of things.
Sure, there's communication is one thing and consultation is one thing. But
actually involvement and input to the outcomes.
That is, yes, that is essential to a good outcome. So that is all I want to
So, I mean, one of the things that's distinctive about this, and it's important because the model to date has been to redevelop housing estates like Waterloo, and that then means that people need to be relocated and it blocks up new people coming in because you're using places for that. A site like this gets around that problem because you don't have existing people there. But I looked at the sort of some of the comments that came up on Facebook, and there's a couple of comments on there where people seem to be raising concerns about the possibility of having public housing people living in next to their nice suburb. And I'm just sort of, I mean, I'm aware, for example, that there is some public housing just opposite the school. So there's already public housing in the vicinity that people may not recognise. But there is, when you start off a new area like this where you don't have existing public housing, then you've got those sort of stigmas that are out there to be able to need to be sort of addressed. Have you given any thought to how you do that in a situation like this?
We'll continue to talk to the community about it.
I think
They're
you're
great
talking
people.
about the greenest bit of Newtown. And there's general enthusiasm for the social mix, but how it's done is the critical question, and how much. And I had a question, Michael, as well, because there are the public sites like the dive site in Patna Road.
Yes. Yep.
Are they going to go the same way?
I'm not aware of what the intention is with that dive site, but they are looking at housing, and that could be key worker housing, for example. I know that is a topic of discussion because it's proximity, especially for health workers,
Right.
because of being in the hospital precinct.
I mean,
So,
REDWatch has a policy on this, doesn't it? For
On which
maintaining minimum of social housing and affordable housing.
Oh, well, the city has targets for social and affordable housing across the LGA, which are not being currently met. So the city wants to see those increase. From REDWatch's perspective, we want to see an increase in social and affordable housing, and in particular in the affordable housing side of stuff, so that you actually have people that are grown up in the area being able to live in the area, and people that are working in lower income jobs, whether that's in the health area or police, or whether that's people who are working in retail or whatever, all the things that are necessary within the city. You need to have accommodation for those people that are close by, so that you actually can have a mix right throughout the city. So I think, and when we had the candidates forum a few days ago, I think was the one thing that everybody agreed on, that we needed more affordable housing. So, you know, right across the political spectrum.
Libertarian.
Sorry?
Except for the libertarian.
Oh, libertarian, okay.
Was there a
Sorry?
numbers?
So we didn't get to specifics on numbers, but the city has targets, but the targets we're going backwards from the targets at this point, because the bit that's growing is the private part, and it's not being matched by the number of affordable and social housing. So that's percentage is slipping, which is the city's concern.
Can I ask my question now?
Yep.
Okay. The other day, I live in platform apartments, and the other day, myself and a couple of my fellow pensioners went down and did a cleaning bee, because there's been a massive accumulation of rubbish, mostly right when you come off Wilson Street and come down the driveway to come down Carriage Works. And we've tried in vain to find out who owns the land and is responsible for maintaining it and cleaning it. And we've rung pretty well everyone in the world, and no one claims responsibility for it. Who owns the land and who is responsible? The other part of the question is, there have been some CCTV cams set up on a lamppost that are privately owned by someone, we don't know who, near our apartment block, and we want to complain to someone about them to get rid of them, because we feel they're an invasion of our privacy and just inappropriate to be there, and we don't know who to contact about them either. We've spoken to our landlord, we've spoken to the police, and council, and no one seems to know about any of these issues. Who do we call?
Tahi currently own the site, and I'm happy to get some details or find out who the right person to contact is, and I can give it to Jeff and you can disseminate. Yeah.
There has been an ongoing problem that we're aware of, that there hasn't really been management across that part of the site. And yes, it's very poor for the people that live there. And if we can find out what the arrangements are in the short term, and then it'll become housing portfolio's problem to.
That would be great, because they've been driving us crazy, those two issues along our area, because the wind blows the rubbish down to platform apartments and down to carriage works, and it makes us look worse than we are.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'll leave the rubbish to Michael. But I'm Pamela. I'm from Clovers of the city. So I know that we're looking into the CCTV cameras, because they've been reported to us as well. So I'll just follow up on that when I get back to the office and let Jeff know.
Yep.
Because and we couldn't immediately identify the need there, but anyway.
Thank you. They're driving us quite crazy.
Monica.
I've got another question when you're ready.
Thanks, Howard.
You know, I've lived opposite construction zones before. I know how noisy and dusty and dirty it gets, and we've already got the noise from carriage works, but we all know here that we live opposite a function centre, so there's going to be noise, and it has got better than what it was, but it can be quite maddening. So we've had times when buses have sat in front of our building, revving their engines all night, waiting to take people away from carriage works. But that's not part. That's part of the question. The question is, when they start moving in and out big trucks, in our building, we have a great mixture of people. We have people with disabilities, we have young children, we have shift workers, we have that entire gamut of people that are going to be disturbed by that noise. And my question is, instead of all those trucks going out that one little exit up near Lively's, up, you know where I'm talking about, can we make carriage works go the full length of the road, the way, right down to where it goes into the beginning of Eveleigh or somewhere? Can we add an exit so that the trucks aren't all going out that one place? They'll be going past my place, for example, and they already make a huge amount of noise for the ground floor residents. Now we know we're going to have to live with this. That's life. That's inner city living. It's not going to be much fun, but it's what it is. But is there a way that we can have another exit or entry for that purpose?
We'll have to look into that. I mean, the traffic management, I'm not familiar with the traffic management of the site, but it is really good feedback to understand, and we'll take that into our planning.
I say it as I've lived opposite a construction zone before, and I suspect half of us are going to ask for a transfer just to get away. And it could take a couple of years to build those buildings.
Yeah.
You know?
I might make a comment on that, Howard, from two different directions. One of those is that when the 2008 plan was put in place, we did ask the Department of Planning to look at the traffic management plan, because we didn't think it was adequate. The department agreed with us. And what was supposed to happen when the entrance road was put in, there was supposed to be a new traffic plan put together. And it didn't happen because the entrance went in as an infrastructure proposal rather than the first DA, which was supposed to be looked at. So there are some issues on that. But I would also point out that, in fact, for the western end of the paint shop precinct, the plan that was exhibited 18 months ago actually has that built with construction happening past your building.
Fantastic.
So they were planning to actually take the two entrances and build at both ends of the paint shop precinct, and then they were going to put the middle road in to do the middle bit. So
Gotcha.
there's a series of issues there that are going to need to be worked.
I look
through.
forward to hearing the result. Thank you.
Any other questions online or anything comes?
That's me done.
Any questions from the floor? Might get an early night tonight.
I'll ask one, if you don't mind, Jack. Michael here, Counterpoint. Good to see you again. Just a quick question because it came up in conversation. It's probably not specific to this site, but in terms of human service planning, we're looking at how do you involve people that are on the waiting list for public housing being consulted on the design and development of new communities or renewed communities. Have you got any insight to that? Because we know the minister had an interest in that space, but operationally we've came a bit unstuck on how you actually do that.
Look, it's a good thing, and we are working on that of how we engage with people with both lived experience in social housing, our residents, but also the needs of people we are trying to house. Trent, we have people who do go out and engage with the community. When I say community, that's our people, our residents. And so we do have a mixture of input, and we are working on ways to do that better. I know historically that it has been sort of limited to planning consultation, and that's for statutory purposes and things, but actually sitting down and workshopping with tenants and people who live in our houses about their experience, what do they need, what works for them, is something that we're doing. We are doing that on some other sites before we start drawing plans, and we are looking as well in some houses getting tenants to actually look at our plans and our homes to give that feedback. It's a work in progress is probably the best answer to that. And the important, I suppose, point about people on the waiting list, we need to make sure we are understanding what their needs are. And, but we do have a lot of people already, tenants that we are talking to get their input into plans. So, yeah, does that answer the question?
Yep, sort of. Thank you, Michael. Cheers.
I mean, just on that, I guess if you're having a priority for people coming out of domestic violence, where you've got single parents and children, then that might have some specific requirements in terms of how you actually put that the accommodation together.
We do, and that's a good point. We do look at the allocate when we do a development. We do look at the waiting list and of the people in that zone, and what's called the allocation zone, and we understand who they are, and we do have good visibility of that and what their needs are, and we can then sort of make sure we design the homes accordingly to meet the needs of that people wait list in that allocation zone. But it's also a bit, it's not just people on the wait list. We do bring all sorts of people into how we allocate people. So, yeah.
Mike and I are trying to get some of that information at the present moment for human services planning for the Waterloo Human Services Collaborative, but finding it a bit tricky to get hold of. Keep coming back. There was another question down here.
Yeah, mine was more thinking that we were getting close to wrapping up and trying to work out what next steps could be in terms of staying informed and.
We're happy to come back and update regularly. At the moment, we're absorbing all the information that is out there and working out how to then continue with that. So diving into things like the contamination, understanding, getting briefings on the planning controls, and working out our plan to our schedule of we've got to sort of I've got to allocate some internal people to look at, be dedicated to the project. So we're right in the middle of all of that at the moment. Probably be in a month or 2 months' time, we could probably come in and give you more of an indication about timing. But that's probably we won't be starting to draw things in the next 2 months. It's still working on the land transfer details and our, I suppose, call it programming of the projects.
So it might be good when you've actually allocated somebody to manage the project.
Yep.
At that point, for there to be a contact number or email for that local people can feed into, would I think be a good start. I mean, I'm acutely aware that we're having this conversation in Waterloo and the site is way over there. One of the problems is actually finding a location over there that is, because carriage works is difficult to get space in depending on what's happening. Redfern Community Centre is the next closest, but that's not exactly sitting on the site. And the other area that I wanted to explore was whether or not there was any possibility of using the school, because the school now has a large meeting area in it, but I haven't had a chance to follow that up. But it would be good potentially next time to actually have something that was sort of down in that area, if that was possible. But
we'll have a look as well. What may be down there.
Yep. Michael, you said the GA is involved with the design. Is that correct?
That's the pattern book part.
That was a general.
So you
pattern book.
Designers as yet.
But we're working on all that detail. We may we're understanding what Transport and Tahi, what people they've engaged, and we're just working through those, whether to take on those arrangements or not. We do, but as Homes New South Wales, we have what's called we have a partnership with the government architect, generally across all our homes. So we do work very close with them, a centre for design that's of both our people and government architect to focus on social housing design.
Thank you.
Okay, any final questions online? Okay, well, we might call it a night. Thank you very much for coming along. This is only a very preliminary conversation, but we know that there was people were concerned about what the announcement meant and what it might mean for the site and who was going to be doing what. So we thought it was best as early as possible to actually get Homes along to be able to say what it was they could say and to hear some of the feedback from the community. And then we can follow that up in a couple of months or a few months' time when they've actually got a team that's looking at the site and see where we can help.
Yep.
So thanks very much to Michael for coming on. Thanks for having me. And good night.
Thank you.
Just one final thing for those people that there's an election coming up for council. The front page of the South Sydney Herald has the 9 candidates that came along to the Alexandria Park Candidates Forum. And Norrie has done a cartoon in there which highlights that they agreed on, or most of them agreed on housing.